So like I said, this was inspired by Daedalus, and Daedalus was a huge, huge spacecraft. You can see this Asian man image here. He's one of the artists on our team. He does absolutely phenomenal work. And you can see the Daedalus next to the Saturn V. So the Daedalus was about 55,000 tons. It was the size of a Nimitz aircraft carrier. It was a huge beast. It was designed, like I said, by the British Interplanetary Society. The propulsion system, and I'm going to gravitate towards talking about propulsion just because that's my area of interest, even though the problem is far more vast. So we used, Daedalus used a pulse fusion engine, which I'll talk about if there's enough time. The fuel was deuterium helium-3. Helium-3 is obviously very, very rare. It's not at all abundant on Earth. There is some quantities on the Moon, but evidence indicates that it's going to be very difficult to mine it in sufficient quantities. And the Daedalus team actually chose to mine from Jupiter, because that's where helium-3 occurs in abundance. Target was Barnard's star, because at the time, in the 70s, they believed there was a planetary system. The evidence that they had, we now know to be incorrect. There may actually be a planetary system there, but the evidence that they use has been sort of disproven. And what the final study involved was about 20 research papers that ultimately demonstrated that interstellar travel is or was possible with credible extrapolations of 1970s technology. So a very exciting sort of hallmark study. So our project, Project Icarus, has a fourfold purpose. We're not just designing an interstellar probe. One of the primary things we want to do is motivate the next generation of interstellar scientists. We've been inspired by some of the big names, like Robert Forward, for example, and some of the other big names in the field. But what we want to do is get the younger generation interested, and as custodians of that dream, we need to keep that interest alive for generations. We also want to generate greater interest in the real-term prospects for interstellar research missions. Like I said, it's our responsibility to get that message out there, to market what we're interested in doing. I mean, marketing is almost an ugly word. For physicists and engineers and scientists, we want to just do our research, but we have to sell what we're doing to get support for it. The third purpose is what I alluded to, the actual design of an interstellar probe, and four, to provide an assessment of the maturity of fusion-based propulsion systems. So Project Icarus, we had, there are a lot of options available to us, but to provide continuity with Daedalus, we chose to stick with fusion. So the origins of the project, this is on Lambeth Road in London, the headquarters of the British Interplanetary Society. We've been there a few times, I'm sure some of you have visited the headquarters. So really the founder of Project Icarus was Kelvin Long, and he got chatting with Mark Millis in 2008, talked about the idea of doing a successor study to Project Daedalus, and sort of got the thumbs up from Mark. He also approached the original Daedalus team and proposed the idea, who also gave him the thumbs up. And then I joined the team sort of a few months after he began that as co-founder, and then we've sort of been growing from there. So we launched the project on 30th of September 2009. So, I think one of the important outputs of a team is, we have to demonstrate that we're actually doing real scientific research. We're not just sort of like a little club sending each other emails. Wouldn't it be cool if we go to the stars? And, we're actually we're actually publishing papers. So here are some recent research papers that have passed through peer review or in the progress of being published. And also some of our output, we do a lot of blogging, we do a lot of articles to Discovery Space News, for example. So it's all sort of part of our mission. So a couple of years into the project, we started realizing that, hey, we need to get things a little bit more formal. We've got this great inertia, we have a lot of gravitas. Let's form a non-profit foundation and sort of start building from there. So we formed Icarus Interstellar, which was founded in March of 2011. And here's our mission statement. It essentially says that we want to accomplish interstellar flight by the year 2100. So we've given ourselves 89 years, so plenty of time to hopefully realize the ambition of an interstellar flight. And we say we're going to accomplish this by researching and developing the science and technologies that will make interstellar flight a reality, igniting the public's interest and engaging with everyone who's willing to invest in the program. So this is the team as it stands. So we've got a core design team of just over 20 people. About half have PhDs. Like I say, we're distributed all across the globe. We're fortunate to have a number of consultants on the team. We've got Vince Cerf, who's the Vice President of Google, who we're very proud to have his name associated with the project. We're incredibly happy to have Greg Matloff on the team, and Paul Gilster on the team. So we've got this real great team of consultants who sort of help guide us and tell us when we're going up the wrong path, for example. And also we're getting more and more active with engaging the student community as well. So at the moment we just have 3 student designers. We define a student designer as someone who hasn't yet got their degree, undergraduate degree. So we think it's important to engage with the younger generation. And this is the way that that we've organised the organisation. So we have the board of directors, and then we've broken things down. We have a research committee, under which Project Icarus, which I sort of described in a little bit of detail earlier, Project Icarus falls underneath that. And we have a number of other projects going. For example, Project Forward, which is a beamed energy propulsion program that we've just initiated. Project Persephone, which is going to be a study for a manned starship. Icarus, like I said, is unmanned, it's robotic. We also have a public outreach committee. Like I said, we think it's important to engage with the public. So, we have newsletters, we go to a lot of conferences, we publish things on Discovery Space News. And then business development as well. I mean, we're living in a new era here, in the early 21st century. All we seem to hear on the news is that there's no money, there's no funding. It's very depressing. And so what we're doing is saying, well, okay, if there's no money, let's go and find it ourselves. Let's figure out what people are interested in. And I mean, if you think about it, if you can make 20 guys driving around a track over and over again for 5 hours interesting, which I'm talking NASCAR obviously, which generates millions of dollars each year. Surely, research to build a probe to go to another star system, surely we can create some kind of business opportunity from that as well. So we want to take the initiative here and say, okay, if there's no money, we'll go find it ourselves. We also have an experimental research program going as well. For example, Project Helios and Project Bifrost, which Helios is based on attempting to create a working version, or a mock-up, if you like, of the Daedalus engine. And so that involves injecting pellets at high velocity into a reaction chamber and firing laser beams at them and igniting them. These won't actually be fusion pellets, these will be test pellets to demonstrate the process. And Project Bifrost is really work on emerging nuclear technologies, which I think is a critical step towards Interstellar. And if you think what the steps are going to be, it's very likely that we're going to start with fission propulsion, and then go to fission-fusion hybrids, and then go to fusion propulsion, and maybe even fusion hybrids, for example, antimatter catalyzed fusion systems. Maybe one day we'll have full antimatter systems, I don't know. So, we've only got about 5 minutes left, but there are lots of different classes of starships. So, for example, we can take advantage, we can overcome or circumvent the rocket equation by utilizing the fact that we know that photons carry momentum and can impart thrust. And so I'm sure Dr. Matlock is going to give you more detail on solar sails, and he might correct my numbers here, but solar sails potentially exit the solar system at a few tens of AUs per year, which isn't going to get us to the stars on timescales of a human lifetime. Beamed energy is another possibility. And what you actually do is beam a collimated channel of electromagnetic energy, laser energy, or more economically microwave energy. And we have someone working on this within Icarus Interstellar, Jim Benford, who's been an expert in the field for a number of years now, so we're privileged to have him on the team. Again, terawatt type energies to come up with sort of speeds on the order of 10% the speed of light. More energy than human civilization creates per year. So very ambitious, but within the known laws of physics, nothing new. Nuclear rockets, which can be split into fission and fusion. I mean, we had a working nuclear rocket with the NERVA program back in the 70s, nuclear engine for rocket vehicle application. It was designated as being flight worthy, I believe in the late 1960s, 69. The program was shut for economical reasons. But we have nuclear rockets. And of course, another possibility, another class of vehicle are antimatter rockets. Dirac in the 1920s discovered as a solution to the relativistic Schrödinger equation that there were a type of mirror particle or antiparticles, and so for all known particles there can exist an equivalent antiparticle. So for electrons there are anti-electrons, or what we call positrons. For quarks we have antiquarks. And so an antimatter rocket would be ideal, but as was discussed earlier, at the moment antimatter is created in very, very small quantities, and it's very difficult to contain it for any large amount of time. So I'm going to wrap things up here. Orion was a very exciting class of starship which Les talked about, and Daedalus, again, which was a very exciting class of starship. I'm not going to go into the details because we're down to about the last 30 seconds. Yeah, so let's skip this. I don't want to go over time. So let me leave you with a very nice quote. So I said that all of these interstellar projects are going to be very, very difficult to do. I mean, we're going to need sails the size of Texas, people say. We're going to need Nimitz aircraft carrier size starships to get to the stars. But Anthony Martin at Project Daedalus, he said, if all of this seems like an incredible undertaking, but if we are to tackle the problem on the astronomical scale, then we must attempt to visualize solutions to suit. Thank you very much, everyone.
We've got about 5 minutes for questions.
Okay, questions in the audience? Well, I have a prediction it's going to be a difficult one.
No, I don't think so. In Orlando, I had a discussion with one of the other consultants on the team, Jim French, who's probably the world's foremost rocket engineer alive today. And Jim mentioned that one problem with the Daedalus Icarus motor engine at this point is you have these little bursts going off 200 times a second or so of fusion pellets.
Yeah.
And the backflow from that might create, or he said will almost certainly create, very strange acoustics in the bell. Have you seen anything further about that in the last month?
We haven't done a dedicated study of the harmonics of the Daedalus engine, but what I will say is that we're not actually at the stage where we're down selecting. Now there are about 14 or 15 different ways you can accomplish fusion, ICF being one of them, and ICF has about 4 or 5 different categories. You know, shock ignition, you're using these Holorons and stuff, and of course we've got magnetic confinement fusion, colliding beams, we've got all these different types, 14 or 15 different types of ways of accomplishing fusion. And what we would like to do over the coming 12 months or so is start the selection criteria, start that down select. And you know, what we've got is a relatively young and immature team who are trying to understand the landscape. And so, you know, we're trying to understand what are the different fusion options, and then how do we start, you know, knocking things off. Okay, we don't want MCF perhaps because there's too much mass in terms of the shielding required and so forth. So until we decide, yes, we're going to go ICF, if we make that decision that we're going to sort of go the ICF route, then that will probably be the stage when we're going to study the harmonics of the engine.
Okay.
But thank you. Paul.
Rich, deceleration is a huge problem.
Yes.
Given what we know about what it would take in terms of fuel to slow down in your destination system. Would you comment on what kinds of deceleration options are currently being looked at, and are you looking at something like a mag sail for possible deceleration?
That's a really good question. So as Paul said, the problem gets exponentially harder. It's not twice as hard to decelerate a probe. It's exponentially harder. So we're looking at a number of options for how we will actually engage in that rendezvous mission. So one of the simplest things we can do is just turn the engine around and decelerate, for example. Now the Daedalus study had a top delta V of about 12% the speed of light, and they did all that for traveling at a plus 12% the speed of light. But if you turn that into a 6% the speed of light one way and then decelerated for another delta V of 60% to do the rendezvous, then you would still be able to reach a closed star system like Alpha Centauri within our 100-year time frame. But there are more exotic ideas out there. I mean, we can take advantage of some of the surrounding material. For example, there are mag sails. These are devices that interact with the local interstellar medium, for example, that will in effect create a magnetic drag, which may be able to slow us down. And there are about 20 or so ideas that are currently floating around the team. So it may not be a simple case of just turning the engine around and decelerating, but a case of doing something more exotic, like utilizing mag sails.
I think we need to break for our next speaker.